So welcome. This is an introduction into the landscape of sacred storytelling. And it's springtime. It is like we're right on the edge of equinox, like life is changing. And where I live, it has been dry. I live in Southern California. It's dry, 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 dry. Like we've been looking at yellow fields for a really long time under the stress and anxiety of, what will create space for growth. And I can't even recognize. I was just walking through the land that I live with, and I was like, I do not recognize the land that I live with right now. We have like waterfalls coming off the mountains, and grass is so green. And it really inspired me because it was just showing me the nature of life itself, that the seeds are there. They're there all along. Grass is so strong. It's so potent. Those seeds are there all along, just waiting and waiting for not just any old rain, but for like the deep rains to really come through and soak the land and create space for growth. And so I thought it would be kind of fun to do something a little bit different today, which is rather than me coming through and telling you all my history, because people here actually have heard from me a lot, which is let's actually start in a kind of different way. And I'm going to invite you to close your eyes and to feel the shape of your body. Just notice the shape of your body today. And just notice how you're meeting life. Are you leaning forward and pushing into it? Are you kind of collapsed? Are you like really attentive? And maybe you're listening to this recording, maybe you're doing this live, but this is such a great exercise to witness yourself in space without it being right or wrong, without you having to change anything, but place your attention truly on it to witness yourself and to take a look around and to notice, what does it feel like to be in this position? And is there anything that wants to shift that would bring you more into balance? And so perhaps, you want to lean a little bit more forward or lean a little bit more back, or find yourself grounded on your center and on your sit bones. Perhaps you want to imagine that thread at the top of your head that just pulls you up a little bit more. Those of us who are crouched over computers, perhaps you want to allow your shoulders to roll back. And so we're tuning to this vessel for story that's in our bodies. And so just taking in a nice deep breath, like how much more are you able to take into your system when your vessel is in such a position where it can receive? And exhaling out. And inhaling. Exhaling. And I'm going to invite each of you to consider a story in your life. A story that made you, a story that informed you, a story that really inspired growth in your life. And it might have been a story that pushed on something or pulled on something. And I'm wondering if those who are here have something that's coming to mind. And this could be like a story that a grandparent told, or it could be a story that, an old allegory or an old fairy tale. It could be anything. I can be talking a lot, but I just love this moment when it's not just one voice that tells the story or defines a story, because storytelling is our human right. It's like we're all storytellers. Some of us just think about what it all means to be a storyteller a little bit more. So, for those who are here, giving you another moment to pop in if you'd like to pop in and share a little story of your own. You guys are being really quiet today. Well, I'll start with a story. And this story, oh, do you have one, Iowa? You're muted. You're still muted. Or I don't know what's happening, but I can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
My dog was needing my attention. He was throwing up in the middle of your story, and so I had to go run. So I didn't hear your story prompt, but I'm sure I do have a story.
I'm sure you do too. Is there a story? And I'll say the prompt and I'll tell one and then come back to you. But it's basically what we're here is like, what waters your seed? What were the stories in your life that created moments where you had an opening, that brought something alive inside of you, that inspired another way of being, or a story that you call on? And it could be an old story, it could be a new story, something that someone in your family told you, something like that. And I actually read this story today on Facebook, so it's kind of fresh in my mind. And it also actually is very similar to another story that I told yesterday. And so I love it when these kind of stories come relate together. And this story goes: once upon a time, in a land not so far away, in a land not so long ago, there was a big fire in the forest, and the forest was burning, and everyone was running away and going away, and Jaguar was walking down the path, leaving his forest behind, very sad, filled with grief, very heavy heart. And he started to notice that there was this hummingbird that kept going back and forth and kept going back towards the forest. And like the fourth or fifth time, Jaguar goes, "Hummingbird, what are you doing?" He goes, "Well, there's a lake just over there. And so I'm going over there, scooping up water and going back and dropping it over my forest, because that's the place that I love. That's my home. I'm taking care of it." And Jaguar goes, "Hummingbird, come on. You're just a little hummingbird. You think you can put out that big forest fire?" And Hummingbird, like almost like in a state of confusion, like utter dismay, like almost can't even comprehend what Jaguar is asking, and says, "But if not me, then who will? That's my home. Why would I just abandon it?" And the spirits of the land heard Hummingbird and felt Hummingbird's heart and knew Hummingbird's action, and came in and dropped water and water and water upon that forest. And so who's to say that the action of one, no matter how small, won't inspire the actions of many others? I love that story. I just saw it on Facebook today. And it really lands it for me, this greater theme of, when their systems are so big, like, how do we use our life force, and how could it be like that one person will really make a difference? Iowa, do you have a story that you want to share?
Well, I think it was, I'll tell it in a story. I think it was interesting, just even hearing you talk. When I came on, I started crying because I was working with you at a year earlier at a time when I was seeding so much. And it just did something to me. That there's a reason, like 20 minutes earlier, I was like, I hope I'm on spring break for 2 weeks. And I get a pause where I can show up in the middle of the day when I haven't been able to in months and months. It's like, I hope I can catch you in one of your classes and connect with everybody. I saw Ray here for a moment, and then there I pop on, and it's like, 2 minutes from now, Leah's gonna go. So are you gonna respond to that call that you just heard and that request, or are you gonna stay focused on this stack of paperwork that you've been putting off for a long time? So there, I was touched. Why am I crying? What is happening? What is being unearthed that I haven't had? What is being uncovered that I haven't had a chance to tend to? And so I guess my story right now is that I just am going to embrace sitting in the waters and what's germinating and what's been buried. Things don't grow in this normal cycle that we think of, but what can I start to notice that was buried and tend to, that I thought maybe that I had to leave behind for a while, I guess.
Mm.
How's that?
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Nice. I'm so glad the timing was with us.
Mm.
Amy, I know that you're at work, but I don't know if you want to pop in. She would if she could. So let's get into it. Let's kind of circle the wagons and say, okay, here we are. It's the most potent time of the year. It's a time of the changing of the seasons. We're in spring equinox. We're in the change of cycles. We are literally lived by a big story right now as the world is changing a story. Whoa, we're in a time of revolution. We're in a time of system change, right? It's like whether you follow the stars or you follow the stocks, it's like there's no debate. Life is changing among us, and it's a great time for the rebellion of the soul. And so if this is a time when you are here in service of changing a story, wow, could there be better time? Could there be a richer, more incredible, better time to do it? So let's talk a little bit about words and how they work. So the Hawaiians believe that words are so powerful. And Hawaiians, when I say this, it's like we're talking about hula, right? We're talking about people who understand that their voice, that their chant, it's not disembodied too, because when we talk about the Hawaiians, this is a culture and a practice that is fully embodied. Their prayers are literally ground into the earth through the movement of their body, through the flow of their hands, the step of their feet, through the power of their core connected to their heart, to their voice, to their prayer. And it's like, and the Hawaiians believe that words are so powerful that they can stop the world or set it into motion. If you have a chance to go see the Hawaiians do hula, like, whoa, it's a really so amazing thing, such an amazing thing to witness. Sicilian believes that words are so powerful, they poke holes in the universe. And whew, for those of us who know how to get that the heat is in us, that we are made of fire, it's like we got to watch ourselves extra special, because once the words come out, they will burn through whatever is there, and they will always be there. There's a word in physics. It speaks about the principle that once a word has been spoken in a space, it never leaves. And I kind of love that, because it's like our memories are like that. It's like when you're driving down, or you go across somebody and you're getting into an argument, or something wonderful happened, and you drive by that place and you remember it again. It's as if that memory now lives there. It's part of it. It was woven into the very fabric of that place. When the Maori say that the words don't describe a thing, they are the thing. The Australians say that the stories from the past must be sung to the present in order for the future to exist. In Japan, there is a word called kotodama, and it refers to a word spirit, the spirit of a word, before it even enters into thought waves. We could go off for just an hour on that one, because it's kind of trippy when you think about it. That like before that, the word is so powerful that the spirit of it, it's like, where is it coming from? Where is that coming from? That it's so powerful that it has a life force that enters into my thought waves, and then from my thoughts I will speak it. And that speaking into being, all the ancient religions agree that the world was sung, spoken, and chanted into existence. Sung, spoken, and chanted into existence. So it's like when I'm from the East Coast, and I'm pretty sure it's in the water, but we are kind of born, or at least I was, where I was in New England, with a sense of like being fairly critical. It's just kind of the nature of it. So when I came to a certain age in my life, when I started moving to California, and the whole like glass half empty, glass half full whole thing, I was like, well, that's a bunch of woo-woo stuff. But when I come back to this very ancient wisdom teaching, that the world was sung, spoken, and chanted into existence, that the very technology of prayer That the way that it's oriented is that you always pray for what you want. You use the life force of your heart, of your body, of your voice, of your intention to speak for what you want. That's how prayer works. And it's not about speaking for what you don't want. I always started to think about that when am in a plane. I remember, I'll never forget it. I was in a plane and I was looking down on the earth, and there was this huge, someone had like done, you know how they take those white rocks and they make messages up in the mountains. And I don't know who those people are, but I really kind of love them because you're flying above. But they don't even know the people that are going to see their message. It's such a wild thing. And up there, where there was this message and it said, "No war." And what did I see? No war. I saw war. And that were amplified really big. I didn't say yes, peace, you know, and so it's like, what are the things that are, it's like we're in this evolutionary learning together, and so like bless every single human being that says like I will say no to certain things, and at some point we all need to know I call it an activist archetype. I don't really like the word activist because something in its inherent terminology means that there's someone that does that thing. And it's like, why not just be an engagivist? Like, I'm just
Mm,
engaged with my life.
I
I'm
like
just
that.
engaged with my community, with my family, with my friends. It's like, that's kind of something that we all do,
I
you
like
know?
that. I
And
struggle with that word myself.
I'm an engagivist. And it's like, and how do I engage with life? And so if we were to look at but I like the word activist archetype because there's something with the A and the A, but anyway, and we all get to wonder, what is our archetype of engagement? And some of us are warriors, and these are the people that will fight against that which threatens the good of all beings, and bless our warriors, which are different than soldiers. And there will be our visionaries who can see into the future and catch the thought of an imagining, and will bring it back to the present so that we can build the pathway there. And they might be considered lazy or dreamers, but oh my gosh, if we don't have those visionaries, those dream catchers, those vision catchers, wow. Or we might have the mermaids, and they're not going to go march in a parade, but they sure as heck will go to the oceans and they will sing to her, and they will bring her healing through the prayers and through offerings and through flowers. And so there are so many ways that we can engage our voice, and it's never just one way. It is like, what is the way that life wants to water the seeds of life through you? Like, what are the waters of life that water your seeds? Trying to figure out that line. Thanks for letting me figure it out. And so here we are in this very basic principle of language and how incredibly important our words are, and how words are often misused. They're often hijacked. And so as people who are coming to the threshold of sacred storytelling, and as people who are coming to the threshold of being conscious creators, there are a couple of things that we've got to have on alert. One of them is are we in relationship with people who can do repair? It's like, we're all going to do our thing. Nobody's perfect. God forbid. I think if you're doing perfect, I don't know if you'd be living. I don't know if you'd be like showing up for this great assignment of life, because I'm pretty sure we're on a learning planet and we get to go over and over again because we get to learn things. And so if we're not messing up, if we're not pushing at the edges of life, it's like, well, what'd you do? And so, this it's okay not to use our words perfectly all the time. But the Godspeed, it's like, may we all be in good grace to work with people who we can do repair with, like real, honest repair. And so that's another level of commitment of, it's not just how we use our words, but it's our capacity to listen. It's our capacity to listen, not just for the word, And this is like so key in our time of great big change right now, because here we are in a revolutionary moment of great big change. It's so exciting to be alive right now. Oh my God, the stories we're going to be able to tell when we're old, wrinkled people, and it's like, wow, and it's like these stories of change. It's like, so it's like when so many things, it's like are changing, it's like now more than ever, we need sacred storytellers, because what do storytellers do? We have the golden ticket. It really is. We have the golden key out of every stuck story that there is. And here's why. Because we have the key to make the story as big as possible. We can see the multidimensionality of it. We are not one-dimensional in our sight. So when it comes back to this conversation of, oh, wow, we're not all perfect, and we're all going to say different things at different times, and sometimes just going to mess up, may we also in this moment, and here we are, we're talking about white privilege. Here we are talking about economic justice. Here we are talking about real systemic change in our countries, in our world. And so sometimes people are going to say things that are just messed up. And as conscious creators, as people who are working towards, I would think, maybe hopefully the healing of our planet, then one of the things we have to do is percolate our ears and really hear for the intention as well as the words being used, because we're in this heightened state of learning together and learning new ways. This is what happens when people just come on and you've already heard my masterclass so many times that I have to offer up something different. So here we are. So what's up? What is a story? What's a story? Like what is it? We're talking a lot about language and all of that, but like what's a story?
I heard something very recently that made me think about you. And there's a tribe, and I don't know what tribe it is, but tribe in the Americas, and they have a saying that you have 3 times to tell a story. And by the 4th time, that story works you. So just be so careful and aware of the stories you're telling yourself. And I've been, my head has been stuck in like just a headset, and I've been telling the same story over and over. And that was such a powerful, jarring, waking share that somebody gave me. So
I love that. I love that. And that idea of, right, a story tells us, one thing that I really appreciate, and a couple of different things. I once heard that in indigenous cultures, where they come together and have regular sharing circles, that if someone brought the same problem to the circle more than 3 times, and each time advisement was offered, that if the story didn't come in another way on the 4th time, the person was actually asked to take the story somewhere else.
mhm.
And I think that there's a collective intelligence and there's a collective genius to understand exactly what you're saying. Like if you tell the same story over and over again, right, it will start to tell you, it will start to own you. It will start to live through you. And these stories might be like, oh, like I'm I remember I used to like I once had a voice teacher who was very angry at me when I was younger. She would really get on me. And she'd be like, Leah, you were born with these chords. If you would only practice more, she said I had a good voice. And if I wanted to sing professionally, I had like the God-given materials, whether or not I had the will and the discipline and the practice was something else. That's what she was trying to get on me about. And so it's like I knew from a very young age that my voice wasn't half bad. Right. It's like I knew that. And sometimes as I got older, I would go into these rehearsals and I would kind of play this little small, like, I don't know if I can really sing. And because I would say that, everyone thought that I couldn't sing. And then it come to a point for me to sing, and they'd be like, oh, well, but you can sing. And it wasn't something flattery. It was like kind of like, well, we believed you. We believed that you couldn't actually sing, and it really began to get amplified, that idea that people will believe the stories that we tell about ourselves to them, for better or for worse. You know, people will believe us. So if we amplify our insecurities, if we amplify our woundings, our greatest fears, my grandmother said, your greatest fears will come to pass. And there's this teaching from this great storyteller, and I'm so sorry I can't remember his name, but if you go look up on TEDx Charlottesville, uh, change a story. I think if you use all those Google terms, you're going to find this fellow. And he tells a story in the way that I remember it, that when he was very young, I think he broke both of his legs or something. And it was a pretty rough accident. And his mother said, "You will never tell this story in the same way. You will not tell the story in the same way ever." And she understood the very nature of storytelling. The stories that we tell about ourselves will then create ourselves. And so this idea of that, to be so aware of and right, like the spirit of a story will come live through us. So I want to touch on this, right? Because we know that the stories are powerful, and that what I've understood about stories is that if you really want to change a story, if you're like, if you see a story, I'm going to change that social structure story, or I'm going to change that inequality story, or I'm going to change that abuse story. And if you're really committed, if you're really, really committed to it, the story will come for you. The story will come for you, and it will live itself through you so that you know it inside and out. So I'm going to talk about a couple of different things in terms of that. And I know that because I remember doing the story of betrayal with I started catching on younger, where every story that I would take, I'd be like, wait a second, I just said I'd do a love story. Oh, the best love in my life. Or, oh, I'm going to do a story of betrayal. Oh my God, I just experienced a betrayal like I've never had in my life. And I'm like, oh, it's because it's because I said yes to the story. And there's no way that I could speak with the absolute true resonance of knowing, of knowledge from my bones, from my cells, if I didn't actually truly understand it from the inside out. So I do say that as a cautionary tale, like, be careful of what stories you say yes to. I'm not saying be afraid of stories, but it's like, so we're kind of coming back to, we're going way out there into the mystic before we even enter into the practical, but that's just the kind of day today is going to be, apparently. Sorry, Theo has come to join our conversation today. This is Theo.
I think your kitty might have turned down your volume. You're just getting a little hard to hear.
Oh, Theo, you're in the way. You're so in the way. Is that better?
Better, yeah.
You just literally got in the way of the speaker. So a story, if we come back to a story, it's an operating system. One way of looking at it, very, very grotesque kind of explanation, but we're going to use it, and we're going to use it because humans often refer to them in reference to the latest technology. So we're in the land of computers, and so story is an operating system, and it teaches us our belief systems, our values, what we believe is possible. It guides us in how to live in the world. It shows us what roles we should play. It warns us about, how to be good to each other and how not to be good to each other. It really, in its core essence, teaches us how to live. Teaches us how to be humans. When we go back to the original stories, the origin stories, those stories were literally instruction guides on how to live on the planet and how to live with Earth. And they held all the rules and the teachings of how to be in collaboration and co-creation with this planet. So when we look at storytelling that way, okay, well, that's a story. Look, it's even in our language, TV programming, right? It's like, it's just built in. Think about the stories that were being told around your living room, around your dinner table, the stories from your parents about that informed your expectation of what you would do or what you wouldn't do in life. And now start thinking about the stories from your culture, the stories of your time, and all the books that you read. Like I laugh because I was raised on Little House on the Prairie, and when COVID struck and we were all wondering about food and resource and all that, I joked to my friends, I was like, I just went all Little House on the Prairie and I got like flour, rice, and butter. And my friends were like, "Did you eat that?" And I was like, "No, I don't eat flour or rice." But you know, I just, that's like, that was the story inside me for what you do when you stock up. You know, you get flour, rice, and butter. You know, so it's like and sugar. You know, so it's like, you know, it's like these stories. They stay with us. They inform us. So and now we're here to talk about sacred storytelling, right? So if we understand that a story, and I should say this because, you know, I usually do my big long bio and I just skipped it today because I get bored of it sometimes. Forgive me. But one of the things I'll do is I'll often give good credence to all the great teachers that I've had an opportunity to be in their presence and learn from. And there are some amazing ones like Michael Mead and Martin Shaw and Carolyn Casey. And there's so many people who've truly, Stephen Jenkins, who've truly informed the way that I think and come to the threshold of story. But I'll also tell you that I have a couple of other teachers that don't often get the creds that they deserve, like the oceans, like the roots of the trees, like the wind, the canyons. And this is truly a place where I go to learn the depths of the mysteries of story, because I truly believe that stories do come from this earth and that they hold a spirit inside of them, and that the spirit of life itself needs a vehicle. Spirit of life needs a vehicle, just like our soul needs a vehicle if it's going to have this whole great human experience and enjoy the physical pleasures of life. You know, that just like that, it's like stories, that the story is the vehicle for spirit. And they say that metaphor is the earth speaking out loud. That metaphors are the language of spirit. Excuse me. Sean Kane says that myths are the earth speaking out loud. It's a common wisdom teaching that that metaphor is the language of spirit. And so story is the vehicle for which spirit can speak to and through us. And so if you're a story carrier, you'll also know that no story will ever speak to the same people in the exact same way. You know, that most there are many different ways of talking story, and some people will have a story that's memorized verbatim. You know, to me that feels like slavery. God, who wants to be forced into, it's sort of like the what's it called, when you go to a, I can't believe I can't remember this word. When you go to the word, and it's like a factory, you know, and you have to go through and do the same thing over and over and over again. Can you imagine being that story that never gets to ever change the way that you speak, and all you have to do your entire existence and be repeated the same way? I think that would be horrible existence. And so then we have these other stories that run wild among us. They say that a myth is a story who has no author. I just love these stories. They're primal and they're wild, and they've never been caught or captured. And they'll change as they speak through us, because just like, you know, every flautist can play the music, but it'll come out slightly differently through the musician that plays it. And that's the same way with stories, and we're these great instruments. And every story that comes through us will be played slightly different through our instrument. But also stories, there's this wild technology in them where they speak to those who are catching them. I once told a story that I told a bunch of times, you know, and it's this story about a girl that falls in love with that has her mission. She's got her mission. She's supposed to go to the castle. She's supposed to do all the right things to get there so she can get to the mysteries of life. And this dragon falls in love with her. It's kind of a mess. And he's supposed to kill her if she doesn't like hit him in the heart, you know, and she missed and she didn't hit him in the heart. And so he'd fallen in love with her though. And so he didn't want to kill her. And so he thought he'd do her a favor and just give her a ride to the castle anyway. And when she finds out, she's just appalled. She's just appalled that he like ruined her heroine's journey, right? And she's kind of a snot, you know, she's kind of like sorry guys, for those of you who are type A, she's kind of a type A, and she's just like, I had to do it this way, and you messed up my way, and all this stuff, maybe a little, you know, all the things, you know, all the anxieties of life, you know, and she couldn't see like the gift literally of her life that had just been given to her. And in this moment, he says, you know, can I, you know, she's like, well, what do you want for saving my life? And, you know, he's so beholden, he's kind of taken by her. And he's like, well, I wouldn't mind a kiss. And I've told this story a bunch of times. And in every story, she's appalled. She's like, oh God, please, I'm going to give you dragon a kiss. Um, but one time when I was telling it in this group of, they were like 10, 13-year-old girls, what ended up happening was I'd tell them the same story over and over again. But in this one time, she was like, oh, bleh, bleh, oh, you're so gross. Blah, blah, blah. And she got mean. She got mean in a way that I had never seen this character get mean in the telling of it. So as a storyteller, I got really curious, like, why did the story live itself through me in that way, in that moment? And this kind of goes back to really practices of acting that when I was originally taught acting, when I was studying professionally, it's like, like in the best moments, and this is going to sound strange, kind of in the best moments, you don't remember what happened because you were so radically present with the co-creation of what was happening. That it was literally happening through you. You weren't doing it. And when I came back wondering, I was like, oh, maybe teenage girls just needed to see what cruelty looked like. Maybe there was something that the story was trying to show, in that way. And so in this way, coming back to, right, like stories, the spirit of them will come to live through us, but they're talking not just to us, but through us to those who are listening, because there's something magical that's happening. There's this thing that's happening. It goes, dee, 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 dee. When I create that image just now of the dragon and the girl and the blah, 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 it's like my right lobe started to activate, and it's, and did you catch the image, Iowa? Were you?
Absolutely. I can see the little activation on your head too.
That extrasensory sight. And so right, so what's happening there is that like your front lobe is also activating, and it's kind of magical, right? We location traveled, we reality bended, we creature created, like we world created, we did all these things with just the technology of speaking and listening. Like our human technology engaged with each other. And it's kind of magical. It's like full on magic that we can co-create that way. And without even planning to, and without making a plan or goals or objectives or, a strategic plan, we just freaking created together. And one of the things that is really, alive in me in this place of co-creation and magic, Stanford calls, or actually Princeton calls, neural coupling, where we've done a lot of research on what's happening. And yes, our brains are absolutely agreeing to collaborate together. So it's like, it's the most ancient technology in the world that no one in our current time can fully handle. And yet story, all of a sudden, its very presence has sort of become the it girl. Like, I don't know if you guys remember, I feel like it was like 2018, 2019. She was on the cover of all the magazines, story this, story that. And it's like for the first time, like, or, in our time, like we could actually see story as an entity that lives among us. And it's sort of like we were fish drinking the water. And now all of a sudden we had another way of really being with it. But there's a lot of different kinds of stories. And so I want to talk about that for a minute. So we have, we're here talking about sacred stories. So what makes it a story sacred? What does that mean?
I think spirits involved, presence. There's, I tend to think of myself as being emptied out. The more empty I am, the more sacred my stories.
Yeah, I love that. The more empty I am, the more sacred my stories. Like this clear vessel. I really appreciate that. Yeah, the other piece I would add into that is the intention, because it's like the intention for how we're telling our stories. And what defines a sacred story to me is this idea that it's a story that's come in service of life. It is in service of life. And in that way, when we're looking at a sacred story, where we know that a story will infuse us with energy. It will infuse us with the desire to live more. it will give us energy to show up. It will give us courage to be brave. These big stories that are coming through. And as we look at these really big stories, it's like, here we are in this moment when we say, okay, um, like, what is this? How do how do I understand like a sacred story from, let's say, like a zombie story or a clone story? And to me it's very simple, and at this time I feel like more than ever we need our conscious creators on board with our sacred storytelling goggles to be able to like distinguish, and to help those around us. In Welsh, the word guide means, the word storyteller means a guide between the dimensions. And so it's like, we're like, storytellers are the guides of our time. We're helping people make meaning. And one other piece about story is that when we go to France, we learn French. When we go to Spain, we learn Spanish. When we go to the land of story, then you learn symbols, you learn metaphor, you learn archetype, because that is the language that story speaks through. It's not literal. And so even if you look at all the stories of our time, and like, wow, we just went through COVID, right? Whoa, all these stories, and it's like, whoa, to one person, that one story will make total sense. And to another person, that story will be like batshit crazy, And so when you look at like, well, how as a storyteller do you meet these moments when we have all these different kinds of stories? And there's a couple of basic things, basic tools, like 101. How do you meet this? One, true stories. True stories come from a place. And others would say it literally comes from the earth. So where did that story source from? Where is it from? So to know a story, you have to know where it's from. It's just like going out on a date with somebody. What do you have to find out really, really fast? What's your relationship with your parents? It's like, because that's going to tell you a lot. Like, where are you from? And indigenous cultures in Hawaii, when you say hello to someone, you say hello and you name the land that you're from, because they will understand you more if they understand you're a mountain person, or if you're from the rivers or from the ocean. These are common principles for how we get to know and understand the world around us. So this idea, when you look at a story, where is it from? Okay, that's like 101. The other thing is, who is its creator? Who is its creator and what were they in service to? Were they in service of connection, of bringing us together? Were they in service of profit and taking advantage of your human technology, of making you have to look? Are they in service of disconnection and creating fractions? So to understand a story, then you have to understand what was it created in service of? Another way of looking is like, how does it make me feel? It's like, you can look, there can be a story that's a teaching story, a warning story, and you're like, oh, I'm scared. But did it give you guidance on how to live better in the world? Did it leave you with something? And then there's one other piece around looking at the stories of our time. And I was just reminded by this, and Tyson Yakamura brought this in, and this aspect of teaching, and he's from Australia. And he says that, in his Australian Aboriginal practice, that people would come and they would all the different tribes would gather, and they would come around and they would tell all their different stories about the moon. And he talked about the distinction between good stories and bad stories. And that stories that are trustworthy can live beside each other, even if they see different things. And so these are three key ways that you as a sacred storyteller, that you as a conscious creator can kind of make meaning, can make sense, can navigate through these times. Because I would say we need most are those stories that are supporting life, that bring us together, that help us collaborate, that help us connect to our hearts, that help us feel like there's a sanctuary where we can wander around and examine the wounds, examine the blind spots. These are the kinds of stories that we need more and more and more of. When I was looking at the stories around COVID, and some of those stories, I was just like, there was nothing in them that my brain could say that was true. but they were very, very popular stories. So as a storyteller, I'm curious. I'm like, well, what are people seeing in there? What's happening? And so there is this technology, there's resonance, right? Stories hold resonance. And I wish we could go into the whole science of that some other time. But like, I was like, okay, well, what is in this story that's resonating in other people? You know, and as I looked at, this whole piece, I was like, right, remember how stories don't speak literally, and how they speak through metaphor and they speak through symbols and they speak through archetypes. And so when I looked at those stories again, and I said, well, do I think that's literally playing out? Oh, heck no, I really don't. But did I understand the resonance and that the greater aspect of what the story was actually saying was extremely resonant for a lot of people? I sure did. And I really got why certain stories were catching and becoming so popular, because there was something inside of them that was very resonant, that felt very accurate and true to a lot of people. And so I would say, to navigate the times that we're in, it's time for us to become truly multilingual, and we really need to be able to start learning the language of story, because the complexity of it is driving us. Like symbol speaks us, even if we don't speak symbol. It's still the origin of how humans, of our how we communicate. Um, so are there any questions, any thoughts so far?
I mean, I'd love to hear more on your perspective of the COVID stories, but I'm not sure this is not here, but at some point, if you ever wind up doing something bigger, I'm just super curious about that.
I did do a whole big thing on the story of COVID, but I think I put it into a mythic. I
Yeah.
could put the story of COVID, put it in a mythic way. Um, I mean, the greatest piece that I could say, and look, what I want to do is, I usually don't talk politics in the stories. This is a very politicized issue. And the reason I don't is because it's so beautiful that so many of us get to come together and be in the place of the heart and not be in the place of the mind or politics. So once in a while, if it comes up, I actually ask for some grace and say, okay, I'm not here pushing any political agenda. I really don't care if we even agree or think the same way. But all I'm doing here is like someone who's super devoted to storytelling and understanding the stories of our time. And so I come in a state of curiosity and wonder. That's literally how I meet these stories. I'm like, you tell me what you're about, because it's a mystery. So I'll tell you a little bit about, like, how I met one of the stories of COVID. And so one of the stories, and I don't really remember it well because I didn't catch it. It wasn't mine. It wasn't my story to carry or do anything with. But I do remember that there was a big story that was going around how political leaders were doing sex trade, that there was rituals being done with children, and this whole exchange of power was happening and all of that. And I looked at that story and I was like, well, it's kind of amazing because just the language alone creates doubt, right? Because I'm like, wow, do political leaders do that? Blah, blah, blah. And do I believe that it's happening? It doesn't matter. Okay, it really doesn't matter. It seemed a little outrageous to me. But that doesn't matter, because as a sacred storyteller, I looked at it, I was like, whether that is physically true or not, there's something that's true in it that's resonating. Okay. And so sometimes that's what we need to look at. What is it that's resonating? You know, and so for me, I saw a lot of fear. I saw that there's a lot of fear in it, but I also saw that there was a betrayal of power.
Mm.
The story, and like what I heard was a story of that of people of power and privilege were taking advantage of those vulnerable ones who cannot protect themselves.
Gotcha.
And that looks like an accurate story to me.
Mm.
Whether it was playing out in the way that the story told it, it's not, I don't know, but was the story accurate in terms of it communicating something that was very alive in our system? Absolutely.
Mhm. Thank you for clarifying that. I appreciate it.
So, yeah,
Yeah,
it's for clarity.
indeed.
That's kind of a class today. We did a kind of a wild wandering in a way that I don't usually wander around that much. Hello. How do you always say Asha?
Sure, yeah, yeah. I had a hard time getting on.
Oh,
Okay, yeah, I'm here. Yeah, yeah. Just about. There's so many stories that are plain old lies in the world right now. You know, most people know they are. Maybe not most. I don't know.
yeah. So it's like there's different kinds of stories, and this is where we get to put on our sacred storytelling goggles. Like, are there stories here? And this is right. To me, it's just like very like what directs my compass on north? That's just it, And so, um, the sacred story feeds us, nourishes. I feel better, stronger. Yum. Oh God, I want to go work out. I'll quit sugar and caffeine. Yay, life. And then there's that maybe I touch more grief. Maybe I access a part of my unconscious, or maybe I can see a blind spot. Like, it helps me grow or be myself or be human. Then we have these other stories that are zombie stories, and they're feeding on life, and they're creating separation. And you kind of want to die a little bit afterwards. And maybe humans don't belong on Earth. And you're right, nothing can be fixed, and world's going to hell in a bucket, and might as well eat all the fish out of the ocean, because eventually it's all going to be gone anyway. So it's like, you're like, ooh, yuck. It's like, I just feel it. Then there are these clone stories, and they look like stories, and they smell like stories, and they act like stories, but they're not stories. They're preying on the technology that we understand of how the human mind works. And so you'll know those because they're empty. It's like eating cotton candy. It's like, they leave you hungry. So it's like marketing. Marketing will often use the technology of story against us, and they leave us wanting something. It's very clever. It's just totally genius. So yeah, there's a lot of different kinds of stories, and it's in the piece that, I want to invite us all into today is like, we're so powerful. We are so powerful. And going back to the beginning of our class, which you didn't get to hear, but I'll leave you with one hummingbird story, and we started with a hummingbird story, and I'll end with a hummingbird story. This is one of my favorite stories. It's a creation story. It's an origin story. I have no idea where it comes from. It was handed to me when I was very, very not so young, and it's one of the few stories that stayed with me for me to carry. I usually I'm one of those story catchers or catching stories of our time, and I don't get to carry a lot of the old ones. The story goes like this. Once upon a time, back in the day, when all the animals could speak to each other and all the humans could speak to all the animals, there was quite a lot of talking going on. And there was a lot of chatter. And there was a lot of arguing. There was a lot of one-way conversation and not a lot of listening. And you know what happens when there's a lot of talking and not a lot of listening? It gets louder, and it gets louder, and it gets louder. And it got so loud that God looked down and was like, oh my God, I can't. God says, oh my God, like he's calling to his God. I was like, God, like I can't create in this kind of mess. I can't think straight. I've got a migraine. And in a moment of desperation, they say how darkness helps the migraines. The God, he, she, who knows, takes a big blanket and throws it over the earth. There was silence. For the first time since anyone could imagine. And some ran off to the outskirts, running away from the darkness, and kept running and running and running. And some found little caves to like curl up into a little fetal position, waiting for another day to come, or wondering if this was the end. And then some came all together, and they were warmed by each other's heat. And they started to sing together. They would catch one song and sing it all together, because that's how that they knew they were together, is when they could sing together. And all of a sudden, Adam was like, you know what? I got this, guys. I'm going to go up there. I'm going to pull that blanket down. And they went up, and nothing. And Eve was like, well, I've got my nails, and I'm just going to scratch my way through. She went up, nothing. And the hippopotamus went up, and the hippopotamus was like, well, I'll get love a start, and I'll just like throw myself into it. Nothing. And the lions were like, well, we've got this big teeth, and we can bite our way through. Nothing. And it goes on and on. But every time anyone went up, they were like, yeah, do it. Yeah, try it. Yeah, you go. Yeah. And everyone that went for it, just like everyone was like, well, at least they're trying, go, go, go. And then Hummingbird, it says, I got an idea. And look, it's not like anybody believed that Hummingbird could do anything that any of those big guys couldn't do. But they were like, everybody was cheering for everybody. It was just kind of what they did. They're like, yeah, Hummingbird, go. And Hummingbird, rather than try to push his way through, just made a little dot, just a little hole. And the next thing you know, he's like, all this light was beginning to flood through. And all of the other beings and creatures were like, yeah, Hummingbird, that's so cool. And wow, like you just made a line. And Hummingbird's like, oh my God, I made something. And then Hummingbird started to make other things. And he started to tell the stories of his time. And he started to put them in one at a time. And they say, that's how we got the constellations. Eventually, everybody came down, and Goddess was so impressed that they were like, wow, you guys really, you taught me a thing or two about collaboration. I didn't know you had it in you. It was so good. I don't want you to ever forget. So I'm going to take the blanket off so you can keep growing your food. But I'm also going to put it back down for half the day so you never forget how we all got here together. So I love that story.
Thank you.
And I'm going to leave you with that. And what we do have coming up is we have a class called Vision Stories. And we also have a class coming after that called Cantadora. And what I'll say is that these are the last classes I'm teaching. I will not be teaching online again in this way because I am ferrying on to do my own world of telling more stories. But the School for Sacred Storytelling is going to continue, and we're going to bring on more teachers, which is really exciting as guest faculty. And we'll also have something coming up where we have our teachers in training, our story facilitators, will be offering a wisdom stories class at times that I don't normally teach. So if vision stories is something that you catches your fancy, then that's coming up. And today's your last day to register. And I'm going to put the link in the Zoom if you want it. And then right after that is Cantadora, which is the only class that we teach about where you catch an old story. And so that's all about carrying the old stories. So
Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much.
you're welcome. You're welcome. You're welcome.
Ignore my email about not being able to get on. I eventually changed the password and everything. So,
Okay.
but thank you for your time.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Good to see you.
Leah, thank you for washing away some of the mud and dirt that was over my voice, over my vision. I appreciate you so much.
Oh, I appreciate you too. I miss having you in the rooms.
Oh, I miss it so much. I'm like running after creating programs for preschoolers, and I'm running all up and down the Oregon coast, and I am doing such a different thing than I was doing, but I am trying to settling into it. So
okay. Well, maybe we get to come back around when the time is perfectly right, and it's always there for you. Indeed. Thursday mornings, 9 a.m. There's a creative writing class on Monday Networks. So
beautiful. I'll keep my eyes out for some of those evening times that you offer.
Yes.
Thank you, Leah.
Bye.